Hello, I'm Eugenia Foxworth. Welcome to the Foxworth Theory. Thank you for tuning in to this week's podcast. And our guest today is Tamil Robinson. Tamil Robinson is a visionary with artistic insight that came from a close-knit family in Newark, New Jersey. A true artist at heart, Tamil is focused and loyal and who has an eye for art and design. Just what I like. Please welcome Tamil Robinson. Tamil,
How you doing?
what inspired you to get into fashion?
Wow. Actually, the artistic side of me, and I wasn't. I didn't have the road or the path into fashion per se at first because I was an artist. I was, a visual artist at first. The paintings, the drawings. Going to art school all my life, pretty much. That's how it actually got started. It wasn't really necessarily, was I when I was a little child, or even a teenager, I was saying, oh, I'm going to be a fashion designer. That kind of segued into the graffiti era. And with graffiti, I was an airbrush master and I was painting on shirts and denim and things like that in my little airbrush shop that I had in Newark, New Jersey, in a couple areas in the place and become, locally known at the time when the graffiti era was back in the, early 80s into the 90s. So from there, airbrushing on clothing and doing artwork, that kind of segue put me into that lane. It kind of evolved that way. Well, it did evolve that way magnificently. And I was able to evolve into the fashion era.
That's very interesting that you mentioned graffiti art. I have another cute question for you to sidetrack back. Did you ever go down to Alphabet City when all the graffiti artists met together back in that day once a year?
Actually, I did not because I was pretty much like a state local. So I did go over, to NYC a bit in my breakdancing days, and I was the one creating the uniforms, the little graffiti shirts and the tees and things like that. But I never really got into the whole, clique sort of thing and going into different circles like that. I always kept kind of stayed, in my own circle and, try to do things my own way because I wanted to be more original, in my style and my art. And I had some great teachers from Arts High School. So I was very close-knit with them at Arts High School in Newark. So it was, I wanted to stay more, true to the art, but still have some fun with the graffiti. That was the fun side. It wasn't the serious side. The serious side was my visual arts, my watercolors, my oil paintings and gouache and airbrushing on canvas, which I did as well.
Well, that's good because you weren't hanging on the railroad tracks, climbing buildings, being chased by the police, but you were true to form as a professional and you stuck with what you wanted. Okay, so now that we've gone through that and you're here and I have the pleasure of meeting you, who are some of the designers that you followed up, while you were growing up, not followed up, but while you were growing up, who inspired you?
Wow. That's kind of like a tough question, but I'm going to try to answer it as eloquently as I can. I really didn't have inspiration from designers or artists per se because my teachers at Arts High School, God rest their souls, because none of them are here. They were really my inspiration as far as the fashion side. Coming from the culture we come from, we always made our own. So, I mean, we did have to buy the brands because at that time we didn't make our own brands. We didn't have the brands that were out when the whole urban, fashion scene hit that at that moment. So I'm going back a little bit because you said who inspired me. So that had to be from a start. So from there, it was more so we made our own style. So of course there were the polo shirts, they were, the tank tops and the different things that we did to make our own style. But I wasn't really into the names at the time, although my mother and my uncles, they were the real dressers. So they bought the designer clothes. So I kind of like emulated my uncles. They had the whole pimp style thing going on. They had their whole thing like laid out. It wasn't really like, it was more of the pimp styles. It was more of like the flashy things. They're going to the fights, they're going out, they're hanging out, they're having their good times, their little weekend parties, and they will all come over. So I kind of like emulated them. So whatever styles that they had on at the time, I never asked them, hey, Unc, was that such and such, or was that such and such, or Auntie, what dress you wearing? But they all purchased like Italian clothing. So I would say different things that they would buy and put together. Those were more so my inspirations. The designer aspect didn't come until I actually got into the industry, until I got on Fashion Avenue and I started learning and studying after my tenure in interior design. That's how the whole fabric situation came in, which you see back here, all the original fabrications that I've done. That took a long time.
I was trying to see some of the things that you had in the back, and I thought, another home I'd like to go and clean.
Yeah, this is my creative lab, pretty much. The whole fabric situation from interior design, that's how I got into wanting to create my own aesthetic in fabrications, because I felt like, the big designers, the big names of the world, the ones who are the big names now, because they have so many generations ahead of me, they had their own aesthetic or their own look or their own signature. So for me, being an artist, I had to create different textile patterns. From those textile patterns, I had to apply them to the different fabrics, the different yarns. So I had to use real yarns, real silks, real cottons. I instead of and I'm going a little bit ahead, instead of taking all my earnings, getting the Maybach and the big house, I had to go and reinvest that into creating my own textile patterns and getting to know the factories and traveling overseas and living over there, so I can be able to build the business of fashion, and the business was in the fabrics and the fabrications and the textile patterns that I originally owned from start to finish.
Oh, that is really, that is inspiring. It's great that you took to doing this. Some of the designers actually have people designing fabrics for them, which I'm sure is quite costly.
Yes.
Now, what is fashion to you?
Wow, fashion to me is actually, it's a lifestyle. It's not just clothing, because I do have an interior design background, so I do design furniture as well. And to me, I think fashion is a whole lifestyle. So it's when you get up from in the morning to when you go to bed, and anything in between that, your car you're driving, the clothes you're wearing, the dishes you may have, your china, your fine china, that's fashion too. All the interiors, the furniture you may have. So that's fashion as well. So I think fashion is pretty much a lifestyle, and most people who are into fashion, I think, kind of get themselves well-rounded with that, with being in that whole lifestyle of it, not just what you're wearing. I think it's almost, it's pretty much like a spirit that you have in you, and you want this, a pair of shoes may be fashionable, but that same pair of shoes, can tie back to the fabrication or the textile pattern to your club chair. And I say that because I do have it like that.
And I believe it. I'm looking at the way that your canvas is now. That's the art. You have prepped your canvas, and I'm looking at your head wrap, your little pocket
Oh yeah.
handkerchief and all the colors that are blending in subtly, but quite nice.
Thank you.
Now, please stay with us. We have to do our mandatory break, and we will be back shortly with the Foxworth theory. Welcome back to the Foxworth theory. If you're just tuning in, our guest today is Tamil Robinson, one of the fashion designers that you should all know about. Now, Tamil, what have you had to sacrifice to be a successful, well, not to be a successful, to be successful in the fashion industry?
Wow. That's a really, really good question. And I'm, it's the first time someone asked me that because I had to sacrifice a lot. I really did. I can't say I sacrificed my time because I wanted time put in, but I did sacrifice some of the things that you would have in a normal upbringing coming from the inner cities of Newark, New Jersey, or the inner cities, period. Like I had to go off in a different, and I had to, and that's family pretty much, because you got to understand something. I'm first generation everything. Being born and then going to art school, you know, not going into the conventional way of college and things like that, the doctor's lawyer, no disrespect to any of that, because I was born an artistic person, but I had to sacrifice a lot because a lot of people coming from where I came from didn't understand. So for me, it was very frustrating because to band together to do something like this, um, you're sacrificing yourself. And I had to sacrifice myself to say, you know what, I'm going to go overseas. I'm going to build relationships. I can't stay here anymore. I had to do the best I can financially. So that was a big sacrifice as well. And trying to have a family and doing that, and they're not understanding, that was really, really hard. And it hurt a lot. It hurt a lot. It hurt some people, but to the fact where I was okay with it because they really didn't understand. So I can't blame them. So it was a big sacrifice for me because I had to leave the country. Nobody in my family ever said, okay, I'm going to go to China. I'm going to go to Europe. I'm going to live here. Unless it was, for the armed services and things like that, they could understand that, doing what I'm doing, you can't really fathom that. You can to a certain extent, but not the way that I'm doing this. I'm doing this as a fashion house. And when the question you asked, what is fashion? This fashion here is a house. And this house consists of everything fashion. That's not just clothing, it's everything. It's interiors, it's the interior of your car. It's so many different things and so many different licenses and different things of fashion business that I had to learn, that in turn, my people, and then where we come from, you can't fathom that. You can always fathom the next rapper. You can fathom that coming out of the hood. You can fathom the next ball player, the next LeBron. You can fathom the next Jay-Z. You can fathom the next even Michael Jackson. But to fathom a true fashion house, what we're doing at the level of an LVMH, which in turn, they own a whole conglomerate of things. So for me, it's not just about my label, which is Amiyah. It's about the TRG umbrella, which I would need the knowledge, the experience, the know-how, the financing, the investors to really pull that off. So that means there's an Amiyah brand, there's a Foxworth brand, there's a Mike brand, there's an Angelo brand. So it's more so than not like an LVMH, but they would understand a Berry Gordy thing, because Berry Gordy had Motown. In Motown, he had the Supremes, he had the Temptations, he had the Four Tops. So I have to put it in that context to my folks so they can understand how this thing goes, because they really can't grasp it. They only can grasp what they see a brand in a store and you buying it and you put it, but it's more to that. So I had to pull back my fashion sense. I had to pull back my talent and separate myself and learn the business of fashion. And that took me leaving, which was very, very hard to do.
But you are an artist, and most of our successful singers, when I say art, it encompasses everything. And that's who you are. People say artists. Yes, artists have, especially artists that are Black, they had to go to Europe, whether they were musicians, jazz musicians, or whomever. And you had to go there. Men and women that we all know that, hey, their success came in Japan or their success came in Italy. What people don't know is that the Italian designers came to the United States. And a lot of the designs that they use, of course, they had more money, came from the hood or the inner city, and you're seeing it everywhere. Right now, there have been a few eras because they forgot they can't do what you do, and because that's a part of your culture. And so, hey, I tip my hat to you. I do understand what you did. And hey, you followed your truth. That's why you are a visionary. Now, the one thing is, what do you love the most about being a fashion designer? I know you love it because you wouldn't be sitting there with all the things around you and dressed as you are. There's a passion in what you do.
Wow, the best thing I love about it is I have the freedom of creativity. And that's the best thing about being, loving what I do. Like, nobody in the world can tell me how to do this or how to do that. Maybe when I get to a factory or something like that, or we get to the artisans or the hand craftsmanship, there's some certain things aesthetically we have to do, to get my vision across. But creatively, I'm so free, I'm so happy, and I want everybody to feel and know that, and that's with anything that you want to do, to get that total inner happiness, just create for what I do creatively. Like, you can't afford that. It's priceless. I don't want to sound cliche, but it's really, really priceless. You can't afford it. And for me, I try to do it to where you can appreciate it. And seeing the pieces that I created, and especially with the accessories. That's I've always wanted to get into that. So that took an evolvement. That took a lot of time to build the right relationships and get with the right artisans. And these guys are so incredible. They do everything, they make from Paris. They do a lot. And I had to teach them before we even made one sample. I had to teach them 4 years my aesthetic before we even made one sample. So that was, for me, just that. I love doing that, to teach and to give the knowledge of how this first generation house wants to do it and where it's going to go. So that's the part I love.
And I know that you do. It's your expression, your feeling. And I don't think you made a sacrifice. I think all you did was embellish that which was in your mind, and you made it come through as a visionary. Now, according to you, what are the skills that are necessary to becoming a successful designer? I know you, 4 years you've taught the people to work with you, but I want to know your thoughts.
Wow. I mean, for me, as far as the artisans go, that the craftsmanship, they have to be very skilled at what they do and the different textiles. And I deal with leathers too. And that's like a whole new world for me because now I'm actually really dealing with it in footwear and in handbags and different accessories that way. And their skill set is very, very good. But it all starts from my skill set, which is the artistic. And I draw it out first before we even put it into a technical package or a blueprint, if you understand it that way. I actually hand draw this out so you can actually see it. So for me, the skill set starts with me artistically, then it goes to them craftsmanship wise, and these are like the best. These are like the last the last of the Mohegans. So I would have to teach a younger generation to get that handset if they want to become skilled in learning how to do accessories or footwear, something like that. That's what I want to do. I want to be able to pass this along to another younger generation, especially the inner city generation, where we buy so much. I wanted to actually get them involved in how to make and invest in different brands like this.
You're creating your legacy. Now, at this time, we have to take a break and we will return to the Foxworth theory. Please stay with us. Thank you for joining us on the Foxworth theory. Be sure to tune in on Thursday at 9 p.m. on the Foxworth Theory Network.